Now, I want to preface this video by making a confession to you. And the confession is that I lost my shit playing Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Stop aiming at the wrong thing!
A lot.
What is going on? Oh my god.
That all you got?
I hate having to wait for stuff to work.
I'm not proud of it, but it happened.
Sam's cup of tea. Sam's cup of tea.
So the year was 1999, and my 8-year-old self had been given enough pocket money to go and rent a video game of my choosing to play on my beloved PlayStation. I hadn't had the console long, so I didn't know much about what I liked and what I disliked. Each week I would return to my local video store Choices and scour the video games section in awe and with wonder, often overstaying my welcome. Most of the time I simply didn't have the funds to rent, and rarely did I have the money to actually buy. This was a time before everyone had the internet at the tips of their fingers in their mobile phones. Some people I knew had dial-up, but just no. And so one of my only sources of information were these monthly PlayStation magazines. But even they only covered certain games at any given time. So what was left? What was left was box art. You see, when information is sparse, you get quite good at using what little you do have. Despite rentals being relatively cheap, I was, at the end of the day, just 8. So procuring the hefty sum of £3.50, which is around $5, could be a mighty feat in and of itself. So without the boundless World Wide Web on hand, I found that there were ways of distinguishing between games and making my once-a-month choice of rental less of a shot in the dark. First was the following. My local video shop would rank game rentals into 3 categories based on age. A brand new game, for example, would be most expensive to rent at about £3.50 or $5, and you could only keep that for 2 days. These new titles were like hot potatoes back then, and it wasn't likely that you would be able to extend those 2 days because somebody else would want to rent it. The second expensive and the most common of the categories were priced at about £2.50, and you could rent these for about 5 days. These were games that had been out for some time, but they weren't ancient. And finally, at £1.75, there were the oldies. These relics could be kept for a whopping 7 days. The second metric by which I would make my decision was simply the box art. Like I said, back then, unless you often read gaming magazines, you had no fucking clue whether a game was good or not. So box art was everything. Even at the age of 8, I could tell a lot about a game just by the box art. And one hazy afternoon, I saw it. Final Fantasy VII. It looked like a classic book. A plain white background with just the text and a green logo. It looked so sophisticated when compared to the other box art, and it really stood out. Not many games had the balls to do that. Most were screaming at you to pick them, promising you the world. But Final Fantasy VII just sat there, classy and confident. Its quiet confidence conveyed a pedigree. This wasn't any old game. No way. The people who developed it had class and must have been established, I thought. I mean, wasn't this their 7th game? These days, there isn't the same pressure or emphasis on making unique box art because of the internet and digital sales, and frankly, it shows. There is a lack of innovation when it comes to box art these days, but nowadays I buy mostly digital anyway, so I guess that matters less. But everything about Final Fantasy VII's box art stood out and was different. What did Final Fantasy mean? And why were there 7 of them? Even the case itself was bigger than the usual PS1 titles. The bulky nature of it made it seem like one of those huge classic novels like Lord of the Rings or Dune. And so I took the plunge and I rented it. What did this game look like, I wondered. Again, At that time, you really didn't know what a game would look like until you put it in. Back then, there was no YouTube or way of seeing gameplay unless you actually played the game, or there was a screenshot in a gameplay magazine. When I got home and opened up my precious rental, I was dazzled to find 3 discs. I recall feeling intimidated. Is this for adults? I wondered. Within minutes, I was thrust into that iconic bombing mission that opens Final Fantasy VII. Even then, I recall finding the characters laughably blocky in terms of graphics. But the rest of the game, the music and pre-rendered backgrounds held such depth and drama. I played on. I wish I could say that the rest is history and that I went on to complete the game until the end, clocking in 100 hours. But the hard truth is that I just couldn't get past the first boss and soon gave up, not touching the game again. Back then, at 8 years old, I was nowhere near a sophisticated gamer. I really just wanted now. I didn't have the patience to play more difficult games, and that is a shame. The heartbreaking thing is that I know I could have pushed through with enough tries, and would have succeeded, I'm sure. But something about the game really intimidated me at that point, and so I left it. But I've never forgotten that opening mission. The music, the flow, the surroundings, all of it was burned into my memory, and it's always bothered me somewhat that I never got to experience it and that I kind of chickened out. It makes me feel like a coward, you know? I might not have the typical, more impressive Final Fantasy VII anecdote, but I think the point I'm trying to make is that Final Fantasy VII's reverberations were felt even by those who didn't fully play it. Even those who were so young at the time they didn't even understand it. Perhaps you heard a friend banging on about it, or you saw a magazine's article about it, or you saw the Final Fantasy VII Advent Children movie advertised in 2006 and thought, what is Final Fantasy VII? Aren't we up to Final Fantasy XII now? Why are we still getting a movie about that particular one? The truth is that Final Fantasy VII's universe just refuses to go away, and it's all the more prevalent now in 2020. The Final Fantasy titles are unique in that each numbered installment is its own self-contained universe and story. Bar a few reused concepts and names, each one seeks to be the next favourite. It's pretty incredible to realise that the most universally loved was the first title to feature full 3D graphics. The world of Final Fantasy VII has to be the most expanded upon since its 1997 release, with games such as Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core, and as I mentioned, a feature fucking film. But it has been this, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, that fans have been most excited about, including myself. So much time has elapsed since the game's first trailer announcement. I think it's been about 5 to 7 years, something crazy like that. But finally, in 2020, Square released what was dubbed the first chapter of several games that would retell the story of Final Fantasy VII. This is where I start my real review for Final Fantasy VII Remake. So in anticipation for this remake, I finally got back to playing a game that I gave up on over 20 years ago. The OG, the original Final Fantasy VII. And I'm happy to say that I ran through that first bloody damn boss that gave me so much trouble years ago. And I've since played about 10 hours. And from the 10 hours that I've played so far, I can see how Midgar might be able to get extended to be a full game. In the original, Midgar acts as a 7 to 8 hour tutorial and barely even includes the infamous antagonist, Sephiroth. It's not until you leave Midgar that his character and motivations truly begin to get explored and explained to you. But having said that, there are a lot of famous set pieces that occur within Midgar, a lot of story beats, and that is what this game focuses on. So now, having finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, along with all of the side quests and most of the challenges, I've since clocked up about 50 hours of gameplay time, and I have a shit ton to say. Does it live up to the insane amounts of hype and the 10 out of 10 reviews we're seeing at respectable review sites? I would say in some ways yes, but in other ways definitely not. Let's start with the good, because there is a lot of good, if not great things about this game. First things first, Remake opens with an absolute bang, as you take control of Cloud Strife as he aids an eco-terrorist group named Avalanche in bringing down a Mako reactor. The reactor is just one of 8 that power the city using the lifeblood of the planet, Mako. Shinra, the company, is responsible for all of this and basically owns and runs the city of Midgar. It's no surprise that this opening was featured as the playable demo back in March. It follows beat for beat the same bombing mission from the original. The graphics are downright gorgeous, especially the character models. The cinematography is masterful, flowing seamlessly from cutscene to gameplay. The battle system is no longer turn-based, but it's a frenetic combination of old and new, playing like an action game while still offering the ability to pause the action and select abilities, spells, and items. The visual splendor is simply breathtaking, and what I always imagined or hoped Final Fantasy would look like one day. And we have truly reached a point in technology where the moment-to-moment gameplay looks as good as those stunning Fmv cutscenes back in the day. I literally got goosebumps when I heard the reimagined, remastered music play. And when that bombing mission track kicks in, oh shit. So yes, the entire opening act, up to the point where the demo ends, is virtually flawless in my opinion. However, this only covers around an hour of a game that took me 50 hours to finish, so what about the rest? Well, as I said earlier, it's filled with good and bad. On to more of the good first. To start with, the characters of Final Fantasy VII Remake are made very much the centerpiece of this story. Rarely does the game rely simply on nostalgia as it presents each of these well-loved faces. They are all represented with a lot of depth, and characters that were on the periphery before, like Biggs, Wedge and Rose, are now fully fleshed out characters. They're funny, charming and believable within this world. In many regards, they are the lifeblood of what makes this rendition of Midgar feel so alive. For example, you really get to know the Avalanche crew, which feels over before it even begins in the Midgar section of the original. Because of this, and the longer time the game has to flesh out Midgar, the touching and more tragic moments are made all the more powerful. The dropping of the plate by Shinra, for example, isn't brushed over as it is in the original, where it felt like you were on to the next thing moments after. And just as after the destruction in the opening bombing mission, the game doesn't shy away from making you sit with the consequences of your morally grey decisions. In the original Final Fantasy VII, Midgar was a believable place anyway, but Remake takes it to a whole other level as they explore the complexity of a society controlled by a corporation. Yes, Shinra are greedy bastards, sucking the planet of its livestream, but they do offer electricity and infrastructure. What is Avalanche offering other than the destruction? It makes you think. Granted, amongst the fleshed out parts, there are some cringily one-dimensional renditions like Heidegger, who hasn't been updated from the mustache-twirling mastermind he was in the first game. When the game's story approaches well-loved or iconic moments from the original, Remake does not disappoint. The creators of this game have an incredible ability to create rhythm and give things impact just at the right moment. It seems as though they understand what made the original tick, in many ways. As I said earlier, the combat is a lot of fun. It flows smoothly in terms of visuals, and each character has an incredible array of impressively satisfying movesets and abilities. The materia system makes logical sense and is tied with the game's story and world so seamlessly. Boss battles in particular stand out for their sheer spectacle. Each battle has various phases that really create this Hollywood epic tone. In addition, when fighting certain human characters, you get these incredible modifications to the fighting system and brief fight animations that flow seamlessly into and from combat. It's during those moments when you really feel as though you are playing in a Final Fantasy movie, and I hope to see more of that in the future. The setting and surroundings are also beautiful. In many areas, they even use pre-rendered backgrounds that not only help to preserve graphical real estate, but I think also to pay a bit of a homage to the originals. Anyway, for the most part, this game looks gorgeous. The first time I entered Wall Market, for example, and the Shinra building, I was blown away. But it's the character models that really stand out the most. And you can tell that this is where most of the graphical power is going on moment to moment. However, there does seem to be an issue with low-resolution textures. It feels as though we will get a better graphical version on the PlayStation 5 next year, for sure. as there were parts graphically that took me out a bit. Like, for example, Aerith's garden. The flowers looked pretty low resolution and it just didn't fit in with the heights of the other parts of the game. It just seemed a mismatch. And finally, for what's great about the game, I cannot state enough how incredible the music is. It is literally flawless. And throughout every aspect of the game, from start to finish, good to bad, exciting to boring, the music was always there doing something fantastic. Every theme stands out and feels right for the situation and environment. It is just, if not more, memorable than the original, which seems impossible. They don't just rely on lazy rehashes of well-loved songs. They make multiple mixes of each theme, sometimes intertwining flourishes of the battle theme into a later theme, and vice versa. It's just such a treat. This is a positive aspect of the game that must not be overlooked, and I truly, truly hope that it is the same team that work on the music for the next installments. And now, having talked about the best aspect of the game, it's time to talk about the bad. Because honestly speaking, this is the most bittersweet game I think I've ever played. I've never felt so elated and entertained 1 minute.
You can see the tower. I'm sure I saw some fire. Oh, this bit in the original was amazing, wasn't it?
And then the next, literally the opposite.
This path is blocked too, but we're so close I can see it.
Why do
Hey,
this? Why
do you
do
think
this?
these trees-
I hate the fact that they're like putting it up there because they know like you've played it and they're like, do you remember the tower bit? Let's just drag it out.
I know I sound dramatic, but I genuinely had this feeling many, many times during the 2 weeks it took me to finish this game. There has been a lot of discussion about just how Square might turn the 6-hour Midgar section into a fully fledged Final Fantasy title. Some fell on the side of it being better for a more in-depth look at Midgar and those events, and others worried about unnecessary padding, while a third outcome could have been that it was too short of an experience. The truth is that yes, we do get more of an in-depth look at Midgar. The characters and the story events that occur are more fleshed out. There are some great additions that weren't in the original, like a mission with Jesse. Some of the tragic moments are also further explored, which lends more weight. For example, right after the bombing mission goes wrong, you're forced to walk through the blazing aftermath and hear the cries of desperation from the disaster you helped to cause. I was impressed that they leaned into the more morally grey and challenging aspects of Final Fantasy VII stories. And again, when Shinra drops the plate on the slums, the aftermath and tragedy is much more in your face as opposed to in the original, where it is literally a brief story beat and on to the next thing. But, and this is a huge but, here is where the cracks begin to show. You see, there are 18 chapters that make up Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it is undoubtedly a lengthy game, but I would argue that it should have been far shorter. Buried within these 50 long hours is a 20 to 30 hour gem of a game, and I'm talking about 30 hours with everything, with all the side quests. Now, I know that some may say, I finished it in 30 hours. Yes, that is certainly possible if you ignore the side content, and I'm taking that into account also. All in all, my issues with this game stem from it wanting to have its cake and eat it. On multiple fronts, Final Fantasy VII Remake tries to be two things at the same time. The first is that the developers want to only focus on the Midgar section, a 6-hour portion of the original game, but it tries to be a full game. In my opinion, it fails in this regard because it wants to still be like a Final Fantasy game that has the same freedom most other installments do, but it doesn't have that. First off, Remake structure is pretty linear, dictated by chapters. There are only a handful of chapters where you are given a chance to explore an area and complete tasks and side quests. During these points, I tried to do everything I could. And while these areas have some nice detail, the side quests themselves are mindlessly dull and go on for far too long. Also, navigating the world as Cloud gets tediously slow as many sub-areas are separated by these slow duck under this or shimmy through this crack animations. This doesn't seem much of a big deal at first, but after 30 or so hours, I yearned for a faster traversal system. But you might say, okay Sam, so what if the side quests are dull? Why not just play the main story? Okay, so let's talk about the main story and gameplay. Granted, a lot of side quests in a lot of great games are kind of boring, and you don't have to do them, so it doesn't matter. So let's talk about the main story. Let's do that. With regard to the main story, if you're mainlining the story, there are incredible moments and set pieces in this game. Moments that the developers clearly know the fans will be anticipating, and boy, do they take advantage of that anticipation. Pretty early on, a disturbing pattern emerges whereby a quest is set off with a clear and exciting objective. Perhaps a cool set piece opens it up. It starts as the original did, and you think, oh, here we go. It's that bit where they go to the second reactor, but it all goes to shit. And then there's the Airbuster boss, and then Cloud falls and meets Aerith, right? And yeah, you'd be right. That all happens. But in the remake, what they do is take each of those beats that in the original felt like one epic flowing set piece, and they slow them all down, breaking them up into little individual pieces. Remember how Cloud and Co jump the train and hastily reach Biggs and Wedge? Now that is literally over 2 hours pulling switches and getting on elevators. Remember that shock when you get ambushed by Shinra's president and the Airbuster shows up? Now the Airbuster is literally teased for over an hour. They go on this rigmarole of building it up. Instead of it being a surprise, you spend ages going to 4 of these individually identical rooms and choosing what strengths to remove from the boss before you fight it. And they try and justify it in the story, saying that we can remove all these parts of the boss and it won't be able to do this and this. What? It just got so comical. And not only that, even the characters themselves constantly chime in and say how ridiculous it is, as though the devs have anticipated the player's frustration. And they have Barrett and Tifa say shit like, oh, not long now, just got another 2 to go. Don't worry, we can do it. Don't give up. The game doesn't even try and pretend that what you are doing is not fun, acknowledging that, yeah, this is just a big shit ton of fucking filler.
It looks like a few of its components are still in transit.
We'll see about that.
Could tamper a little with its loadout.
And
There should be a console somewhere.
This the console you talking about?
looks like there's 2 consoles this time. Find any cards?
Only one, and this time we've got 3 choices. 4 consoles. And never enough keycards.
They're making me build it up too much, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just want to get on with it. I can't know, can I, what the boss is going to be like until I'm fighting it. You know what I mean?
M-units, huh? I'm guessing that's some sort of component?
Yep. An enhancement powered by liquefied materia.
Sounds bad.
Pretty sure I can divert this unit for disposal.
What is this? I thought we're just fighting the boss. What's all this programming him in? What's that all about?
What does an AI programming core do?
Increases processing power dedicated to motor function computation. M-unit. Another type of enhancement.
Feel like scrapping some BBs? Big bomber shells.
Looks like a performance assessment, don't you think? Reduce
Just get on with it! Fucking
work in
hell,
our
what is
favor.
this waiting
Real
about?
though, we need to talk victory poses. Something coordinated for the live on camera.
It
finish.
feels like they're milking
Blow
it
up
in
big,
every way.
Start a new trend.
Veto.
There's a boss coming. Oh, there's a boss coming. Let's have 8 missions about how there's a boss coming. Oh, this is
No
boss.
way
Look,
up.
it's there. The bit's not even ready yet. There's a boss coming. Hey, Minchon, there's a boss coming soon. Look,
No way we're
the
getting
boss.
back up that pipe.
Where is it?
Keep looking.
Hear that?
Is that the boss? No, it's not the boss. It's something else. You gotta wait and fight this before you fight the fucking boss. This is a fucking excuse. Obviously, because this game is only set in Midgar, and that bit is towards the middle part of Midgar or whatever, they're finding ways to like make Midgar longer, obviously, to flesh it all out. But instead of just trying to milk the bit where it's like, oh, in the original you played as the Airbuster, so let's do the thing, and then just keep going on about the Airbuster for ages, and they've got to like remove parts of the Airbuster before they fight it. Rather than do that, just have something else going on in the reactor, like, for, you know what I mean, or change what happens. Do you know what I mean? They're just trying to artificially pad it out. Oh, look,
We
there
give
it
it all
is.
and we'll win.
There it is. It's going up there. Then we've got to go all the way up there to get to it.
And the problem is that when the game breaks down thematically, you get so mind-numbingly bored that you start to try and go about things quicker. But the game just keeps pulling back the reins. It's in this regard where they place filler right in the place you don't want it, right in the middle of something great. The game works so hard to give you these cues to get excited. Oh no, Shinra is attacking the tower, Barrett's up top. Characters yell at you about how urgent it is to get there and pounding music begins to play. So you start to run to that area frantically. But then the game throws up a maze of broken trains, enemies, and even a boss that completely squash any sense of urgency. For this reason, the pace is so frustratingly slow. And the further on you play, the more predictable this design and these tactics become, to the point where I found myself laughing at the game. The constant suspension of flow makes the game feel like it's all retch and no vomit. Sorry about that analogy, but by the time you actually get the vomit, I mean the good part, it's a shit analogy, I was exhausted and frustrated. The deliberate slowing down of the game right in the middle of what could be an amazing pulse-pounding experience not only took me out of it, but showed me how little was really at stake. There was no timer. Despite all the characters and music indicating a lack of time, the actual gameplay tells you the opposite. And this is the very antithesis of what made the opening bombing mission worked. Everyone loved it because it was a concise section. There really is a timer when the charge is set. There isn't any long, arduous diversions. It just gets on with it. Now, I know some people might say, but Sam, it helps the game be longer and gives more chance to up your level in battle. And what I say to that is no. And yes. Yes, that level grinding and fighting repeated battles has always been a part of Final Fantasy. That is undeniable. The difference, though, is that in the past, most of that grinding is related to player choice, in between the flow of the story. It is a choice that the player makes, okay? So before they get onto the flow of the story, they say, right, I'm going to go and run back and I'm just going to go and get loads of battles because I want to get my level up. And then you continue on with the story. When you're on that path, of the story, things don't take that long. The last time this happened was in Final Fantasy 13, and that was dull. And this is dull in the same respects. It's a lot better than Final Fantasy 13, but structurally, it's very similar. It falls into a very similar issue. The battle system. You'll be forgiven in loving the battle system in the opening hours. It looks great, it's both fun and satisfying to cast spells and swing Cloud's Buster Sword around. But believe me when I say that you will be doing so for many, many hours. And it is in this repetition and the more challenging enemy encounters that the flaws become far more prevalent. You see, it isn't quite the turn-based system it used to be, and yet it's not action either. It straddles the line between both. You can only control one character at a time, and have buttons for light and heavy attack, a dodge and a block. Pressing X will bring up the action menu from which you can select an ability, spell or item. However, in order to use any of these, you need to wait for your ATB meter to fill. Most characters have 2 that they can fill at any given time. Using your basic attacks will fill the ATB, and blocking does too, but often a lot less quickly. The system seems like great fun in the opening act, as you're given very manageable strategies. The first boss you face isn't too overwhelming, with Cloud and Barrett fighting together to take down the robot scorpion thing. But it is the introduction of the stagger bar that can add to the issues I'm about to describe. Basically, every enemy has their health and stagger meter. Different enemies have different weaknesses, and if attacked consistently, will stagger them. Once in this stagger state, they slump down immobile and vulnerable for a short amount of time. This is the time to unload all of your most powerful attacks and try to bring it down. All of these systems make sense, right? But under enough stress, they can completely fall apart. The first thing to note is that for the most part, you'll be fighting in a party of 2 or 3. For example, Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett. Tifa is great at staggering opponents with her fast flurries of punches and kicks. Cloud is an aggressive tank that does most damage once the enemy is staggered. And Barrett supports from a distance, lending aid like spells and whatnot. Aerith also serves a similar role to Barrett, just with spells. So if you can't reach an enemy with physical attacks, Barrett and Aerith have you covered. Makes sense so far, right? However, you can only control one player at any given time, as in the attacks. You can still give them commands. However, while controlling Cloud, for example, you have no real say on what Tifa and Barret are doing other than when you issue them singular commands which require ATB. Other than that, you have no way of placing them on the battlefield other than switching to them manually. The problem I had was that as soon as I assumed control of any given character, the enemy would mostly target me. So for example, my strategy may be to use Cloud and Tifa for close-up pressure, and while the enemy is focused on them, I'd switch to Barret to fire my gun from a distance and build up my ATB bar for some support magic or whatnot. But most of the time, the moment I would switch to Barret, the enemy would turn and come charging towards me, closing the distance that allows Barret to be successful, and then being continuously thrown up in the air, for example. On top of that, I would be expecting to see Cloud and Tifa doing what they should, staying close and attacking the enemy, trying to distract it. But instead, the AI would have them either stood off in the distance or chasing a completely different enemy. And this lack of precise control seems at first trivial, but later on in the more tougher, complex battles, it is the difference between success and failure. And I mean frustrating failure.
It's your turn.
No holding back.
Look, see, the thing is not attacking it with me. What's her name? Alright, that's now she's doing it. What the hell? Oh my god. Oh no, 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 no!
Here goes. Danger first. I'll put down ice.
See, look, no one's coming to help Eris.
Stop it!
See? This is what happens every fucking time. Oh my god, what the fuck is going on?
Just hang on. I'm coming. Good to go?
Oh my god, get away!
Not over yet.
What is going on? Oh my god!
That all you got?
So fucking frustrating! Not only must you charge up your ATB bar to use abilities, spells or items, but the use of these can easily be interrupted, especially in certain encounters. This can have a detrimental effect on how useful the more powerful versions of magic are. For example, a constant in every Final Fantasy is elemental magic. Each spell usually has 3 forms, from least powerful to most. For example, fire, firer, firaga, thunder, thunderer, thunderger, and so on. In the original, upgrading magic would lead to more deadly versions of the attacks. The downside was that using more powerful versions costed more MP, magic points. But in Remake, the downsides almost make the more powerful magic worse to use, because now, not only does each spell cost more MP, but the charge time is so long that it can be easily interrupted. Not only that, but once interrupted, those magic points are still taken away. Also, certain spells like Blizzara or Blizzaga or whatever it's called, create an icicle that suspends in the air for a second or two before exploding, causing damage, meaning that it can oftentimes fail to do any damage as the enemy just moves away from it before it even explodes. Why that particular magic? Why only Blizzard? Lightning doesn't seem to have that downside, it will just strike. So this can make casting magic spells on things that are flying or in the air really, really frustrating or downright useless. So then you're relegated to aerial combat, which is very, very bare on this game and needs to be addressed in the next one. Talking of MP, magic points, I found I was constantly on 0 during a long battle, having to top up using the ether item. But again, by the midway point and later, most characters have 50 to 80 magic points, and the ether only provides 20. Remember that you need to wait for your ATB in order to use an ether. Now granted, there is a special item like a mega ether, but you can't buy this and it's in such a limited supply throughout the game. So I constantly found myself in this frustrating pattern of casting a spell, running out of MP, waiting for the ATB to charge, using ether, cast the spell again, run out of MP, wait for the ATB to fill up again, use the ether, over and over again. Why wasn't there a more consistent way of topping your MP that was more accessible to the player? This sort of holding pattern would take me out of the flow of battle, helplessly running around waiting for the damned ATB to charge. If Ether's going to give me 20 magic points, for example, and Thunderer costs 22 to use, so it just completely falls apart. And it's this long and drawn out repeating process that can also occur in some of the boss battles. One I found towards the end that just went on and on, with magic spells being its main weakness. I found myself stuck, waiting for the ATB to charge for one attack, casting the spell, running out again. And it's at these points where you feel held back by the systems, or by the developer's desire to again make everything longer.
It's just a bullet sponge. Trust me, like, it is great. Like, there are things about it that are great, but it's just like doing so many things that I'm like, what? Why make it that annoying? He's aiming at the feet again. Why is he doing that? Look, I'm just doing that same thing over and over again. Firing thunder at him, running out of magic points, putting an item to make me magic points. I don't want to do that over and over again. Thunder. Arsenal. This is what I'm doing, really. Forget all the fancy shit going on. This is what I'm actually doing. Aerith is out of items. Let's wait till I've got my ATB bar. Okay, my ATB bar. Let's use an item. Oh, I could use an elixir. That's actually full HP and a full MP. I'll use this. Use that. 20 MP. Okay, 20 MP. Oh no, I'm in the thing. Right. Wait till my ATB bar's up again. Attack him to get the ATB up bar. Hope that you don't get killed by all the shit. But you can't do anything because you can't actually do it. Defend. Okay, Thunder go. Do that again. Take off a little bit of health. Use Barret. Try and heal her so she doesn't die straight away. Mega point. Okay, quick, because he's going to blow that thing up. She can't get out because she's stuck in the fire. Okay, he's going to fire that thing now, so run away. Go to the back of the thing. Oh no, there isn't anything. Oh look, we've taken too long. Oh no. Even though I've got the most powerful spell to use against it, it still isn't good enough. Oh no. Oh look, I can't do the spell. I've run out of magic points again. So I've got to put the item in. Oh, here we go again. Ether. Oh, I'll probably use elixir, but I'll probably need that later. But I'm using it now, so never mind. Oh no, I'll use the usual elixir. Here we go. There you go. Oh look, he's dead. Like I just thought he would. He's got his limit break, but it doesn't matter because he's fucking dead. Oh, she's gonna get run over. That's annoying as well, isn't it? She's only got one thing, so she better heal him. Yeah, let's heal him. He's up now. Now let's do this. Let's hope the battle's fucking over by the time I do my limit break. Alright, let's hope it probably won't be though. Over and over again. Over and over again. Until you get stuck on something and irritatingly it doesn't work. Didn't have to be that long, did it? Didn't have to be that long. It just didn't. It just didn't. Half the time, fine. You know?
At the start of every battle, I would feel great, casting my magic and stacking my abilities and attacks for my strategy. But after 20 minutes of fighting, my team was dry on MP and health, and that is when things get dull. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some great fights that had me winning by the skin of my teeth. I'm just talking about the parts that felt meaninglessly frustrating and slow. But let's say you do start to lose a battle. There is a sort of point of no return where, let's say one character is down and you have to use a Phoenix down to revive them. That requires the ATB to load up. So your health is low, you need the ATB bar to fill up so you can heal, right? But the only way to fill up the ATB bar is to attack. But that seems completely ridiculous when you've got like 100 health left. So the only options you have are to attack to increase the ATB, which is silly, or run around in a circle praying the enemy doesn't hit you. It can be endlessly frustrating to have a battle system that touts being so visceral and in the moment, and yet have the ridiculous ATB system which constantly restrains you. In terms of replayability, when you finish the game you unlock hard mode and you can replay through the whole game again, which I cannot bear to do on hard mode, no way. You can also visit each individual chapter with your current character levels which carry over after you finish the game. I did find this structure rather bizarre though, as usually in an open world you'd be left to explore the world and complete any tasks you hadn't before, but in this you're kind of going back in time to certain sections of the game where you were briefly given an area to explore. So for example, going back to chapter 14 gives you the side quests you can redo and you can complete the Colosseum and do the fights, but it's just odd and clumsily handled as you have to play through the lengthy opening parts of those chapters as though you have gone back in time to those moments and you've already passed them, so it's just kind of jarring. And this just leads to it feeling a bit tacked on, but I'm sure hardcore players will appreciate it and have a lot of fun getting, 100% of the trophies. The most controversial aspect of this game seems to be the ending for many fans. For 9/10 of your progress, Remake follows Final Fantasy VII's original path. That is until it takes a sudden left turn. I'm not going to spoil any specifics here, but to me, the controversial choice of the ending serves as a metaphor for everything I think is wrong with the game, whereby it has the ingredients, even the contents, for greatness, but chooses far too often to either overcomplicate it or arbitrarily lengthen it. There are these ghostly additions to the game's story that are not only the source of the last-minute twist, but bear nothing of value to the game's story and experience as a whole. Until the final section, they are not explained and frankly not interesting. All the more annoying then that they are sometimes the very thing that the game throws in to continually halt your progress towards the next good story beat. Okay, so I've ranted on and on about what I like and what I really, really didn't like, but now I need to give this a score. My rating for Final Fantasy VII Remake is 3 cups out of 5. 3 out of 5. There is a lot to love about this game. You can tell that a lot of love and affection has gone into recreating this world, and not to mention hard work. But I feel like everything that it gets right, there is something equally as egregious that it gets wrong. While it pushes the franchise forward in terms of design and spectacle, it is also pretty unsophisticated in its structure, leaning on lazy, never-ending dungeons and fans' anticipation to lengthen the experience. Within this bloated package is a much slimmer, leaner, better game that could have been weeded out. It's okay for a game to be shorter. I really hope that the next installment fixes some of these issues. Perhaps with it being open world, that will automatically add the hours they seem so desperate to add to the experience. And that may then leave those story-driven sections padding free. I also hope that they make some tweaks and adjustments to the battle system and allow the player more control of other characters, and that then more complex strategies are available to the player, and that when you do die you feel like it's your fault instead of something that the AI controlled Barrett was doing. I hope I haven't been too negative on this video, but I have to be honest about my thoughts. This is my channel at the end of the day. Thank you for watching. If you wish to carry on watching my original playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Live, I'm at twitch.tv/Sam's Cup of Tea. That's twitch.tv/Sam's Cup of Tea. As I said, I'm about 10 hours in, but I haven't completed the game yet, so I'll be live streaming that. And for all the other content, please subscribe and support this channel. It's a very small channel at the moment, and I hope to grow it soon, but please let me know in the comments what you thought of Final Fantasy VII. If you think I'm wrong, or if you also had the same feelings and what you thought of the game. I really appreciate every view, every like, every subscribe. All I have is gratitude for that. So please subscribe to the channel. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off.
Sam's Cup of Tea.